I have a lot of really cool friends who do a lot of really cool things. I wanted to make it a goal to sit down with these friends and spend about 15 minutes or so getting to know them better and find out about their past, present, and their future. The result is this show. My name is Grant Baciocco, and this is 15 Minutes With. Carla Ulbrich is a songwriter, a comedic performer, an author, and a very good friend. Carla Ulbrich, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Grant.
It's great to talk to you. Now, we're going to talk about all the stuff you've done, but I would like to go back to the beginning. You were born in South Carolina, correct?
I was.
And where did you grow up?
In Clemson, South Carolina, which is a college town, and it's all the way in. It's 300 miles from the beach. Everybody's like, oh, South Carolina, the beach. No, it's 300 miles in from the beach, up near the mountains. So it's almost Georgia, almost North Carolina, almost Tennessee. But it is none of those things. It is a college town.
And when you were growing up, what was the first thing that kind of captured you creatively that you were really interested in?
Well, there's one I remember and one I don't. The one I don't remember, but it's one of those stories that your parents tell over and over, is when I was 4, my mom's sister, my Aunt Pat, came through and had her guitar with her. She was getting her college degree after her kids were old enough to not need, constant care. So she was getting her college degree and practicing classical guitar. And after she left, that I want a guitar, I want a guitar, I want a guitar, I want a guitar. So apparently that was my first seed of what's become what I do. And the thing I do remember was my cousin Lonnie, when I was 6, we were living in Colorado for a year, and my cousin's family lived out there, and he was so funny and so creative and so joyful, and he has done some performing. He's actually a visual artist as well, but back then he was just really, really outgoing, and I felt like he really saw me, like he really got me. I've always sort of felt like the oddball, especially in my hometown, which is very engineering, MBA, left brain kind of stuff, which trickled down to the high school where there really wasn't much in the way of arts, and there was a whole lot of math and science, which I stink at. So I've always felt like I don't quite belong here. Where are my people? I had marching band. That was the closest thing I had. And so it wasn't until I went to college and majored in music that I was like, here are my people. Okay. But the early stuff was my cousin Lonnie, because he was so playful and creative. He was about 8 years older than me. And so he was almost an adult, but super playful as if he was just my age. And then my Aunt Pat planting the seed about the guitar.
Were your parents supportive of your creative pursuits when you were growing up?
In the way that they always paid for lessons and would find teachers. I had guitar lessons. They wouldn't start me till I was 8. And now that I teach guitar a couple days a week, I understand why.
You were in marching band. Did you enjoy that experience, being in marching band in high school?
I loved it. I don't know if I would have finished high school if I didn't have that to look forward to at the end of the day. I played a different instrument every year because I was probably the only person practicing. So I would get bored and we'd be playing the same music the next year. So I'd just change instruments. And
What instruments did you play?
Flute, clarinet, piccolo, tuba, xylophone, and then I was the drum major, so I guess I played the whistle.
I love that you played the piccolo and the tuba, the either end of the weight spectrum for the marching band.
Exactly. It's not so great for the embouchure, and the mouth muscles. Not so great to be flopping back and forth between tuba and piccolo. But
when did the guitar enter the picture? I mean, you mentioned your aunt, but were you playing guitar during high school, or did that come later?
I started lessons in 4th grade.
Oh, that's right. You said this.
Yeah, I took for 3 years, and then my teacher said, well, that's all I know. I only teach beginners. And I wasn't really able to find another teacher for guitar after that. So it wasn't until I kept playing, just noodling around, picking up a thing here or two. I had 1 year with a teacher who taught me to hum and strum, as we say, to sing and play guitar, accompanying yourself. So that was helpful, even though I was in 8th grade and I didn't want to sing out loud. I was like, you know how you are in 8th grade, like, I'm not singing. So, well, maybe not you, but me. And it did help me, though. I got some songbooks and would sit there and entertain myself in my room. That was kind of my thing. When I got to college, I was writing songs and stuff, but I would not play them for anybody. I just had the worst stage fright, and only my closest friends would ever hear my songs. Just horrible stage fright.
Do you remember what your first song that you wrote is? I mean, you don't have to sing it, but do you remember what it was?
Yes. It was something I needed to say to my boyfriend, but I guess I had stage fright in relationships too. Yep, I was 17. If you don't count all the ridiculous, stuff that you write when you're a kid where you just take words, write parodies.
Right.
Take songs and change the words. I've been doing that for as long as I can remember.
Has there always been humor in your music? Because your music is very funny. Like even back then when you were 17 writing these songs, was there a lot of humor in your music?
No, there was none. It was what we gently referred to as os, maybe not so gently, as in os, and morose. That's, yeah, it was all these depressing songs about how my relationships weren't working out, and no humor. It wasn't till later. It was really strange. Once I finally did start performing, I would sing all my depressing songs about relationships not working out and then tell funny stories in between. It was very weird. And then one of my friends finally said to me, you should make that story into a song. And it just never occurred to me to do that.
Yeah.
The funny songs are much closer to how I am in real life. So that was the thing that started it, was the song Love Connection, which was a true story. I like doing true stories because usually they're stranger and funnier than anything I can make up.
Growing up, were you listening to comedy songs, or did you just kind of fall into it?
I was listening to, well, of course, I grew up on Sesame Street, and Ernie and Bert were like my heroes. Ernie specifically, of course, because he's the fun one. And and my parents watched things like the Smothers Brothers, and I think there was some other comedy music that wasn't really called comedy music back then. My dad had Homer and Jethro records, and I had Lenny and the Squigtones, which is a hilarious record.
Yeah, that's a great album.
Still funny. Yeah. It holds up. It totally holds up. It's hilarious. And we had a Gilda Radner album that we listened to a lot. My sister had several Steve Martin albums that we listened to. And I had Ray Stevens and Weird Al. So, yeah, there were... And, when we had records, we listened to them over and over and over. It wasn't just like, how generally people listen to Pandora or Spotify, so you'll hear a song by this person, a song by that person. You would listen to a record over and over and kind of internalize it, whether you meant to or not. So we had the Sesame Street records, too. There was some really funny records. And there was another one by Dr. Seuss. And one line I remember for it, where sadly, the whole song didn't sink in, but it's about measurements.
Uh-huh.
And at the end, I just remember one line from that where it goes, 4 quarts make a gallon. That's the only part I remember. I remember that right? Is it 4 quarts in a gallon?
Sure, yeah.
He needs to make one for metric, because I'm pretty hopeless with that. But yeah, we had a bunch of records that we listened to a lot, and I think that was most definitely an influence. And then on TV, of course, you had Sesame Street and Zoom and the Electric Company, and all using music to either make a point or entertain, or hopefully both.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned you were writing songs and then you had stage fright to perform them. And now, you have performed just about everywhere. I don't, probably just about every state by this point. What was it that helped you get over your stage fright?
A near-death experience.
Oh, interesting.
It's amazing what that can do for you. I got really sick. I had kidney failure and a bunch of other stuff going on from autoimmune problems. And I got fired from my job. I was working in a music store, which I understand is not going to exist much longer because of the internet, store where you walk in, try out guitars and all that.
Yeah.
And I got fired from the job for being sick. I think I missed 5 days in 3 months or something. And they were still trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Not my job. At least not physically they weren't trying to. Maybe mentally they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me. But the doctors were still trying to figure out what was wrong with me. But my job fired me. And I didn't really like that job, but I didn't have the guts to leave it and do what I wanted to do, which was teach guitar. And I didn't know it, but I wanted to perform because I would stay after hours once the store closed and play around with the 6-track and make all kinds of recordings and use all the guitars in there. And, it's just my little secret thing. And I think I played one of the tapes for a friend. Mm-hmm. But after I got sick, and I suffered a long time before I finally got diagnosed, and then before I finally got treated, because there's a long wait to see a specialist, I moved back home, or rather my parents came and got all my stuff and moved me back to my hometown. And I realized at some point, I'm not going to die, because I actually thought I was going to die. I'd gone to the library and read up on things, and I got old information, so it said, 5 years to live. So I was like, once I realized, no, I'm not going to die. Well, let me do things differently, because what was going on before was pretty sucky. So I said, I'm not going to sit there and build someone else's kingdom for minimum wage. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to do what I want to do. And it worked out really well in my hometown because a lot of people knew me and word gets around really easily. And I had a bunch of guitar students pretty quickly. And in the meantime, I had gotten my degree, my college degree, and majored in music with guitar being my main instrument. So I actually knew some things. So that I was like, at one point realized, if I can face down kidney failure and nearly dying and actually come back from it and fully regain my health, stage fright is really silly. So I made myself get out there, and my first gig was this coffee house for tips, and I find it amusing now that I was so nervous asking for that gig. It's like, they're gonna say no. I'm like, they put no. Now that I've played and understand how the music business works, I'm like, they're not risking anything by having me there.
Yeah.
They're not even paying me.
Yeah.
They're not even risking $20. So.
Well, and now, as I said, you've played just about have you played in all 50 states?
No.
I'm sure it's close, though. It's got to be.
I kind of hang around the edges. I've probably played everything on the East Coast. And then in the middle, it's been like just a handful. Texas, Iowa, Illinois, maybe a couple more, and of course California and England, which is not a state, and Canada, also the 51st state. Yes. Yeah,
and you've released several albums over the years, but on your first album, wasn't "What If Your Girlfriend Was Gone"? That was sort of a hit for you, wasn't it? It was. I was surprised because that was a song I was hiding because I thought it was too psychotic to be played. And then a friend of mine, this is where I met Joe, actually, out in a songwriting retreat. We would stay up super late. We're always the last two people to go to sleep. And so it was really late. My guard was down and I was tired. I'm like, okay, I'm going to play this song, but I'm never playing it again for anybody. And you can't tell anyone about it. And I played it and they were like, oh my God, you've been hiding this all week. I think I said something like, we're going home in 2 days and I'm never going to see you people again. So I'll go ahead and play this. And of course, it turned out to be my best stuff. I'm always, at the time, hiding my best stuff. Well, hiding everything, but then hiding my best stuff, the stuff I went out on a limb with. And of course, after that, it became the song that I'd finished playing and I'd play it again. And so I wound up recording it and got played a lot on Dr. Demento, and it's definitely my most requested song of anything I've ever written. And you've also gotten fan mail for the song, haven't you? Yeah, I forgot about that. Re-traumatized. Somebody, at the time I had cassettes. I'd put out a little demo cassette so that I could go get those tip gigs at the coffee houses. They probably didn't even listen to it. They're like, sure, just play.
We'll kick you out if you stink. But somebody got a hold of one of my cassettes, smashed it, and mailed it to me with a note that said, "Sincerely, his girlfriend." I still haven't figured out who sent it.
Someday, that maybe they'll hear this podcast and get in touch.
Let's
Probably
talk.
Now, when I met you, which was around 2001, we met at I think Dementia 2001. That's where we met.
Yes.
And at that time, I mean, kind of jokingly saying it, but you were sort of like living out of your van because you were traveling all over performing. And what was that like, just driving all over the place performing?
Well, it was a lot of fun. I'd catch up with a lot of friends and relatives who I hardly ever see. I love going sightseeing, in the times when, like, super long drives, you have to get out of the car once in a while. So I'd look for strange things to go see. I just love strangeness. And one of my, I don't know if it's a hobby, but one of the things I like to do when I'm traveling is to go to strange museums, like the Museum of Beverage Containers. There's a museum that had the history of barbed wire. There, of course, I had to go to Cadillac Ranch because I was driving right by it. It's that place where he's got like 10 Cadillacs half buried in a field.
Yeah.
In Texas, and I went to Roswell, New Mexico, to see the UFO museum and things like that. So just kind of enjoying seeing parts of the country that, I'm passing right by it. Let's go see it. So that was cool. But playing a lot, there's no substitute for that as far as getting better. And especially when you're doing humor or comedy, you really need an audience to know whether your material's working or not. So the more times you can get in front of an audience, the better. And what's cool about doing comedy music is you get really long, like, could you play for 90 minutes? So you use up pretty much every idea you have that you still like in 90 minutes. And so you're constantly developing material and constantly getting feedback. And that was the great part about traveling. The stinky part about traveling is it's very hard to stay healthy because you don't get proper rest and it's hard to get healthy food.
Yeah.
So that's what made it a little unsustainable for me. And you wear out your car really quickly, which is expensive. So those are the downsides. But it was a period of great growth for me during those several years of being, and you can't really keep an apartment because you come back and your mail is all over the lawn and your fish is dead and so on.
Let's talk about songwriting and sort of what your process is when you are writing songs. Like, do you have a notebook that you carry around with you? Or, how do you go about collecting your ideas and then writing them into songs?
I'm extremely unorganized. So sometimes I wind up writing the same idea down in about 7 different places because I'll make a note on my phone and then I'll make a note on the computer and then I'll send an email to myself. This is a system, by the way, I don't recommend to anyone. And I used to write on scraps of paper. And so I have an entire plastic tub of scraps of paper of song ideas I still haven't explored. And probably won't because at some point they become stale and you're like, you look at the idea and you're like, what? Because you made it shorthand. You didn't write down the whole idea. So what I do when I'm ready to work on ideas, I print it out. Really, I need pencil and paper to work on something. Just something about the computer screen shorts out my brain. And so I'll print it out, hopefully put it in a notebook and, write along the margins, cross things out. And then when I get to a certain point, I'll type in all my changes and print it out again, and then I can work on it some more. I keep a notebook that has anything that I'm the least bit interested in still working on. And when I sit down to write, I'll just flip through the notebook until something jumps out at me like, let's do this today. Mm-hmm. So that I just go where the energy is and do that. I don't try to force a song that I'm just not feeling at that moment. And it may seem undisciplined, but I tried doing things in a left brain methodical way, and it just really makes me hate whatever I'm doing when I do things in that way. It's unfortunate because everything that I do is really unorganized, and yet I still manage to get things done. But I have to do it in an unorganized way. The songs are very organized, but there seems to be a level of chaos that I'm not comfortable unless that chaos is there.
Yeah. One of the things I love about the songs that you write is that sometimes if a song is just, like you have a joke for a song, whether it be a parody or an original, you are not afraid of just writing a short song to just tell the joke and have it be done. Whereas somebody else is like, well, I got to write this out into a full song. And then you're like, yeah, we got the joke during the first chorus. But you're somebody who, at least when I think of your music, I think of as somebody you're not afraid to write a short song with just one little joke in it.
Right. I like to, once the comedy is over, I like to get out. Right. I don't like to beat a joke into the ground. And there have been some songs that have been, top 40 hits that I'm like, by the third minute, you're like, okay, stop beating it into the ground. And I'm not even thinking of anything particular in mind. But to me, if you're going to repeat the punchline, then you need to do something a little different with the setup each time. So it's got a little more meaning to it every time. And I can't always pull that off. So sometimes I just chop the song down to one verse or a verse and a chorus. And I call those my bad song ideas because they don't hold up for an entire song, but they work really great for a snippet, as I call them.
Right. You mentioned that you have taught guitar. If someone wanted to learn guitar, what do you think the most important thing when they're starting out is to focus on if they want to learn how to play guitar?
Getting a playable guitar that stays in tune.
Not a toy store plastic guitar.
Not something from the flea market. So I would get somebody who plays, help you go pick one out that's easy to play.
Yeah.
It sounds like I'm joking, but I'm not. I've had, I don't know, over the years, 5-6 students come in and struggling, and I said, let me see your guitar. And I'm like, good God, I can't play this thing. Play mine. And now you'll know what a guitar is supposed to feel like. And instead of thinking they have no talent, they realize their guitar is a piece of crap, which is not a happy moment, but it's better to know, oh, it's not me.
Right.
I actually can play guitar if I have a real instrument in front of me. So that's, to me, the first thing. And then if you can figure out, and a lot of times if you're only 8 or 9 years old, you don't know yet, but if you can figure out who do I want to sound like, what kind of music is exciting to me, then that's really helpful, because if you can do that and you're playing music you're excited about, it's much easier to stay motivated. You don't have to learn to read notes on a staff or anything like that to be able to play popular music, especially. I have very few of my students do I make them read notes on a staff, even though I'm classically trained. I only do the notes on a staff if they're going to go to college in music, or they want to study jazz, or if they want to be in a guitar program at their school, they have to read notes. So generally I just teach them to read rhythms, chords, tablature, and boom, you can be off and running in no time.
When you started playing guitar, what songs were you playing? Who was influencing your guitar playing?
When I started playing guitar, I was 8, so I was at that age where I'm like, I want to play a classical guitar. Okay, that's not an age thing, that's just me. I want to play classical guitar. And so I actually didn't know about the radio. I didn't know about pop radio. I didn't find it till I was 13. I'd hear kids singing stuff I now know was stuff they heard on the radio. And I'd be like, I didn't hear that song at Y Day Camp. Where did they learn it? Because I learned all my music either Girl Scouts or Y Day Camp or, hymns in church or something. I had no clue. Or my guitar lessons where we were singing, oh, Susanna, it's just songs that are out of copyright so that the book doesn't have to pay for the rights. Just really, really old stuff. So, at that age, I didn't know what I wanted to do on the guitar. I just did what my teacher told me to do, and it was note reading and folk songs. So I had no idea as we're didn't occur to me that, hey, can I learn this Sesame Street song on the guitar?
Right.
If I'd known that was possible, I would have asked, but it never occurred to me to ask. Although I must say, now looking at some of the Sesame Street songs, they're not simple.
Right. Right. No,
They
they're
have a
not.
lot of chords.
Well, if people would like to find out more about you online, where can they go?
CarlaU, CarlaU.com.
Well, Carla, thank you so much for talking to us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Carla Ulbrich is a musician, a comedian, and an author. You can find out more about her projects and where to go to see her live over at www.carlau.com. That's www.carlau.com. Huge thanks to Carla for joining me on this episode of 15 Minutes With. And if you'd like to hear even more of my interview with Carla Ulbrich, download the free Saturday Morning Media app for iOS and Android. And in the bonus section for this episode, you can hear Carla talk about the story behind writing and publishing her book, How Can You Not Laugh at a Time Like This? Get all this and more on the free Saturday Morning Media app for iOS and Android. For more information, visit SaturdayMorningMedia.com/app. 15 Minutes With on the GrantCast is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible in part by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to www.patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly donation for as little as $1 a month. Huge thanks go out to Shay Stewart, Mer Lafferty, Jeff Peterson, Dale Gadania, Stephen Staver, Jackie Klimo, Melissa Crawford, Chuck, Matthew Wayne Selznick, Dave Slusher of the Evil Genius Chronicles, Mike Coughlin, Dorothy Baciocco, John D., Kathy Crawford, Brian Greer, Carrie Whitney, Chuck Tomasi, Chris Foster, Stephen Ing, Clinton of ComedyForecast.com, Vicky DeVries, Mike Wabshall, and Twitter user Buttsinggear, a.k.a. Wildcat. If you'd like to support the show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to www.patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. That's www.patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on iTunes. Every little bit helps. If you have feedback for the show, you can send it directly to me at grant@throwingtoasters.com or get in touch via Twitter, where my username is ToasterBoy. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back in 1 week with another interview. The GrantCast is copyright 2016 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Baciocco, executive producer. All rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.